Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski joins us now on the record. I have to say, you're one of the few politicians who always brings like a worksheet and says, here's what I've been working on. Thank you for that. Before we get into any of it, I wonder if you can tell me about the first picket line you ever stood on. Who was next to you? What were they asking for? Did they get it?
I've been on a number of different picket lines. I think the one that I would talk about first since I've been elected to Congress was in Decatur. ADM, which is Archer Daniels Midland, has one of their main headquarters. The Teamsters were out on strike, and they were demanding fair wages, good working conditions, and I stood with them. And so I'm very proud. You know, when the UAW was on strike and they have one of their facilities here in Missouri, as soon as I landed, the day that strike began, I was the first member to show up to that picket line. And that's the story of my career, honestly, Mark. As you know, I've worked in the labor movement. I don't shy away from a picket line, and I'll show up for working people every day, whether it's in this job or it was certainly even before this job.
You worked for the food and commercial workers, the people who in that union stock shelves and cut meat at 5 in the morning.
Yeah.
What did they teach you about labor that people in Washington never could?
Yeah, well, what I would say is I'm one of the first members, or one of the few members that you'll meet that's actually been on a kill floor in a meat processing plant. And if you've been on a kill floor in a meat processing plant represented by the UFCW, you would know that you'd want a union contract to protect you, to make sure that when you go into that facility, you come out of that facility in a good place. And these are healthy, good working conditions, but that the work that you put into that company, into that shift, is honored with good wages and benefits. And that is foundational to the labor movement. That's what I worked on when I worked at the UFCW. I also worked at the firefighters union. Those are the bedrock issues when it comes to collective bargaining and supporting working people.
But Americans are seeing more of their paychecks, those wages you talked about, shrink these days. There's a nurse specifically at Gateway Regional who worked a 12-hour shift. The week her paycheck didn't clear. Still came back to work the next day. You've talked to these folks. Tell me about one of them. You don't have to use their name, or you can, but just who are they?
Yeah, well, these are people that are showing up every day, exactly the nurse that you talked about, that's putting in a full day's shift and work, making sure that people get access to their healthcare needs that they have, responding. These are frontline first responders, and we have a hospital, Gateway, that is in Granite City, that is basically saying we're not financial solvency enough to make payroll, so we don't know if we're going to be able to pay you for the work that you actually put in that shift, and that is fundamentally wrong, and that's why we've been calling it out.
That hospital's owners sent staff a letter, maybe you've seen it, saying that the bosses wrote $1 million loan to cover payroll, and that this was some great act of leadership. In what country do you get an attaboy for saying, oh, I found my checkbook?
That's not for the workers that help to make sure that health facility, that hospital is running. That is not the responsibility of them to necessarily comment on. What the responsibility is for the CEO, for the people that own and run Gateway, the ownership needs to speak to the financial solvency of that hospital. When you have deeply disturbing cases where someone is showing up in cardiac arrest, expecting to get their healthcare needs met by a hospital, and you have a workforce that is showing up for them, but those same folks that are in that workforce don't know if they're going to get their paycheck at the end of the day, or if because of financial challenges that hospital might be facing, there might be short-staffed. And so in this case, with the gentleman that was in cardiac arrest, wasn't able to get his full healthcare needs met. And so these are very disturbing questions. It's why we led a letter that we sent this morning to Gateway healthcare system, asking them for answers to these questions. Are they financially solvent? Can they provide for the healthcare needs of the community in Granite City and the surrounding communities around it? That is my job as a member of Congress, is to demand that transparency and accountability with the healthcare system.
You can write a letter, but I wonder what power you have. The state of Illinois approved this ownership transfer, and the state of Illinois knew the state of finances that hospital and other hospitals like it around the state have been. This hospital, for years, through multiple change of ownership transitions, has struggled financially. They've seen their revenues decline and decline, kind of like the population in the area. What's the underlying issue here? Beyond the management or the mismanagement of the actual facility, is there some external pressure on hospitals in this part of town?
Well, what I can say is, in my role as a member, as soon as allegations came forward around payroll challenges or people unable to get their healthcare needs met, I've demanded immediate answers to this company, to this hospital, asking that these questions and demanding that these questions be answered. I will say, as your question about response and what the ability is for us to get a response to such a letter, we immediately got one. I'm really happy to say that Gateway Healthcare, the hospital system, actually did respond to us this morning.
How would you describe their posture?
You know, I think they want to meet, they want to provide more information. We made it clear that a successful meeting to us will be getting all of the answers to the questions that we pose to them. That will be a successful meeting, and I'm happy to meet with them. And so I think we will get that scheduled, but again, my job as a member is to demand transparency and accountability. When I hear these types of disturbing allegations coming forward, hopefully they can provide some clarity around these questions, but I'm not going to stop until we get the answers.
As a member of Congress, when a hospital like this that provides medical care for so many people in underserved areas of your district appears to be heading toward disaster, do you pick up the phone and talk to your old pal J.B. Pritzker in the governor's office? Do you ask him why his regulators approved the sale, what their regulators can do to improve conditions there?
Yeah, what I can say is that we've been in immediate contact with the governor's office, with the Illinois Department of Public Health. They are on top of it. They are working it. We are going to stay in communication with them. I did take it upon myself to go ahead and send this letter to the leadership of the Gateway healthcare system to demand answers to these questions. I'm glad that our letter was seen and read and responded to. And so we're going to work collaboratively at the local, state, and federal level to get answers for the constituents that I'm so proud to represent, and especially in our more underserved communities. You know, we have a growing challenge with our healthcare system in this country, and I think one of the things that we need to make sure is that we have hospitals, community health centers that can provide the healthcare that is needed to our communities. And if they're coming up short, we need to know about that. And that's a part of my job, is to make sure that we get answers to those questions.
We started this conversation talking about your affinity for working class people who work in hard-working communities. Granite City is certainly one of those.
Yes.
You hear a lot of shift whistles. You see the smokestacks in that area. You fought to keep the steel mill alive and won for now. But what does a town lose when both the steel mill, the biggest employer there, and the hospital are both owned by people who've never eaten breakfast in that town?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you the heart and soul of those communities are the working people that make those, whether it's a hospital or that steel mill, function and operate. And they are owed a respect for the dignity of the work that they provide. And, you know, U.S. Steel, we've been holding, along with the United Steel Workers, their feet to the fire to live up to the commitments that they've made. They've reopened the blast furnace, which was something that we had been really fighting for. But it doesn't stop there. My advocacy for the community of Granite City and the working people in that community is to see future investment. We want to make sure that there is future investment, whether it's in a hospital system or whether it's at a steel mill. These are places that are critical to the vibrancy of those communities. If U.S. Steel were to leave the community of Granite City, it would no doubt leave a very big hole. When you recognize that in Granite City, U.S. Steel has been there, that footprint has been there in that community for over 100 years. So that's why I take that fight so seriously. We've had some wins, but we still have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, it's a complicated global industry, really, with steel. So I don't know that there are any easy answers to it. But closer to home, there's someone in Collinsville who just paid an electric bill that maybe they couldn't quite afford.
Yep.
That money is something that won't go to their groceries this week. Name one thing that you've done this year to make that electric bill smaller.
Well, one of the things, I'd say two things in particular. One is permitting reform. I think I've been working with Republicans and Democrats that we need more energy generation online. If we bring more energy generation online, that's going to hopefully then reduce costs for consumers. I would just point out, Mark, you know, President Trump came into office saying he was going to cut electric bills in half. We have seen in our region a 16% increase since President Trump took office in utility bills. We need more energy generation. The second thing that I've done is stand up to this administration. You know, one of the things that they've done is brought offline some of the clean energy projects. I'm a Democrat that believes that we need everything. We need all sources of energy in order to bring down utility costs. We need to clear out the red tape. But what we also don't need is an administration that is picking winners and losers as it relates to energy generation. We need to bring all of those clean energy projects back online. So I've also stood up to this administration when they've canceled some of these really critical projects that would help bring down that resident, that constituent in Collinsville's utility bill.
You could quibble with whether or not giving subsidy to prop up or build faster energy is picking winners and losers, but regardless, you're promising a plan here that will bring down gas and utility costs. But you also know that old saying that a plan without a deadline is just a wish. What's your deadline? When will people actually see their bills get smaller? Because so far you've just said, I picked a fight with the president and we're going to make it easier to get permits to build energy one day.
Yeah.
But that's way off in the future.
It has to happen now. I believe that we are, as House Democrats, we're going to take back the House majority in January. I know I've been tasked by Leader Hakeem Jeffries with Congressman Mike Levin to come up with an energy, a gas and utility affordability agenda that we can make actionable within the first 100 days. But I would also tell you that resident in Collinsville can't wait for the election or for January. It's why I've been working with Republicans and Democrats on what I referred to first, which is called permitting reform. Basically, for listeners out there, basically what permitting reform is
cutting red tape.
Cutting red tape. Let's build big energy projects again. Let's get out of the way. Let's not let government get in the way of building those. There are considerations you have to take in community.
Talk to the folks in Madison.
You got to listen to the folks locally. But I think there are things that the federal government can do to get out of the way of building, which more generation is going to bring down utility bills.
You mentioned the working group with you and Congressman Levin, and I want to ask you about that. I asked you at your press conference last week a similar question, but the companies that were in that workshop with you, Ameren, Vistra, they give money to your campaigns. That's not an accusation, it's just a public record, but I do wonder what it does to a person when you sit across the table from them and you're looking to make policy that directly affects their industry. What does that feel like for you?
What my priority is and will always be is helping the working people in this district.
Even if it means telling them that their budget overruns are directly contributing to our higher prices.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think a part of the conversation we were having is more transparency and accountability across the energy sector. That's something that we need. It doesn't matter to me who gives or doesn't give to my political campaign. I am zero focused in on bringing down costs, helping working people. If someone has a plan to do that, I'm all ears. And I think that should come from a multitude of different places. I also very much believe, Mark, that to get to good solutions that make a difference and have government be put back on the side of people, you have to have all stakeholders at the table. You can't just listen to the people that you want to hear from. You have to listen to everybody. And I think that's what's really important, whether you're talking about energy or you're talking about healthcare. We need a seat at the table to hear all concerns so we can come up with the best policy prescriptions that are going to affect working people, bring down costs now.
There are big voices in your own party who are saying that Democrats shouldn't accept corporate PAC money at all, and that corporate PAC money is, in their words, corruption. Senator Alyssa Slotkin, Juliana Stratton running for Senate here in Illinois. This is PAC money coming from Ameren and others. How do you see that?
That doesn't change any of the focus that I have every day. Every day I focus in on, again, the working people, the communities that I'm so honored to represent, whether it's showing up to a picket line, standing up if ADM and Premium or ADM and the Teamsters are having an issue. I was on a picket line here standing up with the machinists, whether it's standing up to U.S. Steel, demanding that they continue to invest in Granite City. I have stood up to corporations throughout my entire career and been focused on the issues that matter most to working people. And that's what I'm going to continue to do.
Let's talk about the bomb waste out near Venice and Madison. Families raised kids on that ground for 80 years, and the government that put that bomb waste there is still deciding what those lives were worth all along. They drew the line at the river. People in St. Louis got that RECA money, the expansion, the compensation fund. Have you sat with any of those families? What did they tell you that money would mean to them, and what has the weight meant
Yeah, I have sat with those families and I've sat with those communities to hear their stories of what it has what it has meant to be downwind from these radioactive contaminated spaces for decades. And I do believe that those zip codes that represent the communities of Venice and Madison should get compensation for the exposure that they've had to radioactive waste.
For our
And
viewers who
that's-
are following, though, the downwind effect is harder to prove than the ground contamination.
Yes.
And the compensation package only exists for a specific moment in time
Yeah.
for downwinders, as compared to in St.
Those
Louis
that are
when there's
directly affected.
the ongoing threat.
But
right?
they're all affected. And so I think it is a job of government to determine how they were affected and at what level they were affected. This is a good example of collaboration at the state level. The state has actually been able to provide some funding to test some of that ground soil as well, that I think will help shed a light on the impact of what this has meant. What I can do at the federal level is to make sure, as I am, that the zip codes that represent Venice and Madison are included in that compensation package when we talk about RECA, the Radioactive Exposure Compensation Act, that Venice and Madison are protected. But we do need to follow the facts, we need to follow the science, and that's why I'm so glad to be partnered with the state on this, the state and local community.
I want to ask you about another one of your bills that really caught my attention. You wrote this idea that congressmen and women should not bet on the outcome of their own bills. They shouldn't
Yeah.
bet on their own votes. Do we really need to write that down? And what happened to the character of Congress
Yeah.
and the people in it that you had to put it on paper?
I know, unfortunately, that is a reality, and I think something that we should be passing a law to legislate and prohibit. People like myself, because of my role, I have access to sensitive government information. I shouldn't be able to then turn around and use that same information and make a profit on it. I mean, the fact that we have to actually put that into law, we can quibble over as to how we got to this place that
Is it
that's
happening now?
necessary. Look, I think there are things that point to the fact that I think there are indications of insider trading. If you read about this, Kalshi and Polymarket, two of the bigger folks with footprints in the prediction market space, do have folks that look into whether insider trading is happening or not. I think that is an indication of the fact that there could be, likely is, and if there is, if we want to rebuild trust with the American people between them and the government that should be serving them, we need to create more transparency and accountability. And I think my bill, which is the only bipartisan bill actually introduced in the House of Representatives with Congressman Adrian Smith, will root that out. And it's not just about me, it's about a spouse or a dependent, also my senior staff would also be prohibited from participating in public policy bets as on the prediction market space. If they want to do a bet about March Madness or football, that's sports. That's
They're not
totally
playing on the
fine.
field. I've seen some
Yeah.
reports suggesting that maybe campaign staff are even placing bets based on internal polling they've seen.
Yeah, it raises very real concerns. I think we need more transparency and accountability. What I can speak to is from a government perspective. Those that are serving in public office shouldn't be using that sensitive government information.
Last one for you.
Yeah.
40 years from now, somebody like me shows up to Granite City with a TV camera and
Yeah.
asks a retired gateway nurse what the summer of 2026 was like back when those checks bounced. She'll remember who showed up and who sent letters. What do you want her to say about you, and what do you think she would say today?
Is that I did everything I could to honor the work that she provided, the critical healthcare services that she offered and provided to the community, and she deserves compensation, and she received that compensation. I also think that for Granite City, more broadly, looking down the road 50 years from now, we want steelmaking to be happening in Granite City. We want a healthcare system that is vibrant, that can serve the needs of the community. That's what I'm hoping for Granite City, and that's what I'm going to keep working toward.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.